Marilyn Johnson had worked at the Parker home for almost 3 years and was used to a certain routine. She arrived every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 6 o'clock, when the landlady was still asleep after her night shift at the clinic, and the landlord had usually gone for a run. That Tuesday, she entered through the back door with her key, stowed her coat and bag in the back room, put on her apron, and picked up a rag. It was a dusty spring in Louisville. Half an hour later, on her way up to the second floor, she noticed something wrong. At the foot of the wide marble staircase lay a body. Linda Parker, in an ivory silk nightgown, arms spread, lay with her neck unnaturally twisted. Marilyn froze, pressing her palm to her mouth, trying to suppress a scream. Then, with shaking hands, she pulled out her cell phone. Detectives Jude Malone and Hannah Holland arrived 20 minutes after the dispatcher's call. Patrol officers had already cordoned off the area, and paramedics had pronounced Linda Parker dead. The sun was just beginning to rise over the exquisite mansions of the Louisville suburbs when Malone parked the squad car in front of a 2-story red brick house. "Beautiful place," Holland remarked, looking out over the immaculate lawn and blooming magnolias. "Picture perfect for the perfect life." Malone nodded. 20 years on the force had taught him not to trust perfect pictures. The housekeeper, still in a state of shock, sat on the living room couch. From her confused account, the detectives learned that Mr. Parker had left early that morning for a business meeting, and the housekeeper was presumably asleep after her night shift. "She sometimes took sleeping pills," Marilyn whispered, "especially after night shifts. She said it was hard to switch." Malone went up to the body while Holland continued her conversation with the housekeeper. At first glance, it looked like an accident. A woman, perhaps in a drowsy state, had slipped and fallen down the stairs. But Malone's experienced eye noticed several oddities. For one thing, Linda's fists were clenched. People who fall in a half-sleep usually try to grab onto something. Second, there were marks on her wrists that looked like bruises, as if someone had recently grabbed her hand tightly. Third, the shards of the glass on the floor near her body were oddly placed, not as if the glass had fallen with her. Forensic scientist Ray Tanner confirmed his doubts. "It's an odd angle of fall," he muttered, taking pictures. "And look at the glass shards. Too neat for an accidental fall. One more thing. There were traces of liquid in the glass. Preliminary, sleeping pills dissolved in water, but the concentration is too high. So either she took too large a dose on purpose, or she had help," Tanner finished for him. Holland went up to the second floor, examining the couple's bedroom. Impeccable order, minimalist interior, expensive cosmetics on the dressing table. "Jude, look at this!" she called, standing by the bedside table. "Prescription sleeping pills? But the package is almost full. Only 2 tablets have been used. The date on the label says it was prescribed 3 weeks ago." Malone nodded, making notes in his notebook when his phone rang. Malone. "Yeah, got it. We're on our way." "What's up?" Holland asked. "Vic's husband's back. He's waiting in the squad car." Lance Parker was a tall, elegant man with expressive features and an immaculate haircut. Even in a moment of crisis, his charcoal-colored suit fit perfectly. He was staring at the house with wide-open eyes that showed disbelief. "There must be some mistake," he said when Malone introduced himself. "Linda she didn't." "Mr. Parker, we're sorry," Holland said softly. "Can you tell us where you were this morning?" "I had a meeting with clients from Chicago," he answered automatically. "I left at 4 in the morning so I could be there by 9. Linda was fine when I left. She'd come back from the night shift and was getting some rest. Did you talk to her before you left?" No, she was sleepy, but she was fine." His voice shook. "I don't understand." "Mr. Parker, did your wife take sleeping pills?" "Sometimes after shifts. She has trouble sleeping, but she's a doctor. She knows the dosage and—" He stopped, put his hands over his face. "I have to see her." "I'm afraid that's impossible," Malone said firmly. "You'd better wait here." While Holland continued his conversation with her husband, Malone returned to his examination of the scene. He went up to the second floor, scrutinizing every step. On one of the top steps, he noticed what looked like signs of a struggle, a slight indentation in the carpet as if a foot had rested there. 2 hours later, Linda Parker's body was taken to the morgue, and detectives began interviewing neighbors and the housekeeper. Mrs. Chung, who lived in a nearby house, reported hearing a muffled argument around midnight. "I don't want to blame anyone, detective," she said, nervously rubbing the bracelet on her wrist. The Parkers always seemed like the perfect couple, but in the last few months I've heard arguments. Not scandals, no. Muffled voices. Yesterday, too. What time exactly, Mrs. Chang? About 11 p.m., maybe later. I take blood pressure medication and sometimes I wake up at night. Mr. Foster, an elderly man who lives across the street, said he saw Lance Parker pull out of the garage around 5 in the morning. He usually leaves at 6 a.m. I walk my dog at that time. We say hello sometimes, he explained. But it was dark today, and I only caught a glimpse of him. Marilyn's housekeeper confirmed that the atmosphere in the house had changed in recent months. Dr. Linda was quieter, she said. She smiled less, and Mr. Parker had become tense. But they were always polite to each other, never fought in front of me. After lunch, Holland contacted the clinic where Linda worked. Colleagues described her as a competent doctor and a considerate person. But the head nurse of the pediatric unit, Diane Ramirez, took Holland aside and said, Dr. Parker has seemed lately troubled. I'd ask if everything was okay, but she'd always say she was just tired. But I've worked here for 20 years, Detective. I know when people are tired and when they're angry. Were there any conflicts with coworkers or patients? No, not at all. Everyone loved her, especially the children. The nurse was quiet. There was one moment a few days ago. I thought she was crying in the resident's room. When I came in, she quickly wiped her eyes and said she was allergic. Back at the station, Holland and Malone collated the information. What do you think? Malone asked. A perfect marriage with cracks, Holland replied. A socially successful couple. He's an investment banker, she's a respected physician, but something was going on beneath the surface. The husband claims he left at 4, but a neighbor saw his car at 5. And then there's the weirdness at the scene. There's a discrepancy somewhere. Lance's brother, Jared Tomlinson, showed up in the afternoon. He arrived at the station after learning of his sister-in-law's death. Unlike his collected, reserved brother, Jared was dressed casually. Worn jeans, a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a leather lanyard with a silver pendant around his neck. His eyes were red, as if from tears or lack of sleep. This is a nightmare, he said, nervously unclenching and unclenching his fingers. I talked to her the day before yesterday. She was fine. How could this have happened? Mr. Tomlinson, when was the last time you saw Linda Parker? Malone asked. Jared hesitated, as if remembering. Last week, Thursday, I think. Lance and I had dinner at a restaurant, celebrating Lance's good deal. How would you describe their relationship? The perfect couple, Jared answered, but his eyes darted away for a moment. Lance always took care of her. He controlled everything to make her comfortable. Holland saw him rub his wrist nervously, as if it hurt. Controlling? She asked again. In a good way, Jared corrected quickly. He loved her. It was just the kind of person Lance was, wanting everything to be perfect. And for Linda, too. After Jared left, the tech department gave the detectives a preliminary analysis of Linda's phone. It's weird, the tech said. There are almost no messages on the phone for the last 2 months. A few work emails, food delivery correspondence, meeting reminders, but hardly any personal messages. Could she have deleted them? Malone asked. Exactly. And by the looks of it, she deleted them regularly. But we've recovered some of the data. Here, look. He showed the screen with the recovered messages. Most of the messages were from a contact saved as J. The last message was dated last night, just before midnight. We have to talk to him. I can't go on like this. It will be decided tomorrow. Malone and Holland looked across the table. The case, which had seemed a simple accident, was looking more confusing by the minute. The perfect picture of the Parker family life was cracking under the scrutiny of the investigation, revealing something hidden beneath the glossy surface. Dr. Olivia Sutton took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. 20 years as a forensic scientist had taught her that bodies always told the truth. All you had to do was listen. Detectives, she said to Malone and Holland, who had entered the examination room, I found a few inconsistencies. Linda Parker's body was lying on a steel table, post-mortem, covered by a sheet up to her chin. The official cause of death was a cervical vertebral fracture from a fall, Sutton continued. But here's the interesting thing. The time of death, judging by the cadaveric phenomena and temperature, was between 23 hours and 1 o'clock in the morning. Malone frowned. The husband claims he saw her alive at 4 in the morning before he left. That's impossible. Sutton shook her head. By 4 in the morning, she'd been dead for at least 3 hours. And one more detail. There was a sleeping pill in her blood at almost twice the therapeutic dose. Not lethal, but enough to make a person sound asleep or stunned. Signs of a struggle? Holland asked. Bruises on her wrists as if she'd been held tightly. Sutton pulled back the sheet, showing the distinctive marks, and microscopic scratches on the floor under her fingernails, as if she'd clung to something or someone. After leaving the morgue, the detectives headed to the office. Lance lied about the time, Malone stated, and that changes everything. We need to dig deeper, Holland nodded. I'll take care of the finances. By noon the next day, Holland had compiled an impressive dossier on the Parker couple. Their joint income exceeded $300,000 a year. Lance, as an investment banker, earned much more than his pediatrician wife, but her salary was impressive. Look, Holland pointed to the screen as Malone approached with 2 glasses of coffee. They have a joint account from which all major expenses are paid. Immaculate credit history, the mortgage on the house is almost paid off. Nothing out of the ordinary. But 3 months ago, Linda opened a separate account at another bank. She flipped the page. She deposited almost $50,000. The money was coming in small amounts, probably to keep her husband's attention. She was getting ready to leave, Malone said thoughtfully. That's not all. Holland opened another file. 2 weeks ago, she'd contacted a realtor about renting an apartment downtown, small but in a good neighborhood. Malone sipped his coffee, thinking about the information. Time to talk to her husband again. Lance Parker looked haggard as he entered the interrogation room. His immaculate suit had been replaced by black pants and a dark blue shirt, and his face was stubbled. Mr. Parker, Malone began, we need to get some details straight. You say you saw your wife alive around 4 o'clock this morning when you left for work, correct? Yes, Lance nodded. She was asleep. I looked in the bedroom before I left. That's the problem, Holland said softly. According to the medical examiner's report, your wife died between 11 p.m. and 1 o'clock this morning, long before you left. Lance's face froze. There's some mistake. I saw her breathing. Mr. Parker, Holland continued, at midnight a neighbor heard an argument in your house. Can you explain it? Lance swallowed, his eyes darting to the door as if looking for a way out. We, had a little argument. Nothing serious, about work schedules. Linda wanted to take a vacation, and I was against it because of my work commitments. That's it? Malone asked. Just an argument about a vacation? Yes, Lance answered firmly. Then we made up and she went to bed. And you? I worked in my office until late, then I went to bed. What time exactly did you go to bed? Around 2 o'clock. And Linda was alive? Of course she was. His voice shook. What are you trying to say? Malone placed a photograph of the bruises on Linda's wrists on the table. These marks appeared shortly before she died. Do you know where they came from? Lance stared at the photograph, his breathing quickening. No, maybe she was banged up at work. The clinic sometimes gets hectic with kids. Mr. Parker. Holland leaned forward. We know about your wife's secret bank account and that she was planning to rent an apartment. Were you aware of that? Lance's face contorted, but he quickly pulled himself together. No, and I don't believe it. Linda wouldn't keep things like that from me. We were happy. The interrogation went on for another hour, but Lance didn't budge from his story. After he left, Malone turned to his colleague. He's definitely hiding something. And he's overprotecting himself. Holland nodded. It's time to talk to the brother. Jared Tomlinson was found in his studio, a small loft in a bohemian neighborhood of the city. Unlike the Parker home, it was a creative mess. Photos on the walls, unfinished canvases, books stacked on the floor. Sorry about the mess, he said, leading the detectives to a small kitchen area. Coffee? Just brewed it. Malone noticed Jared's hands shaking slightly as he poured coffee into cups. Mr. Tomlinson, Holland began, we'd like to clarify some details. When exactly was the last time you spoke to Linda Parker? Jared hesitated, his gaze drifting to the pictures on the wall. Sunday. We talked on the phone. What was it about? The usual stuff. What's up? Work. He ran his hand through his hair. She seemed normal, maybe a little tired. And before that? Malone asked. When had you seen each other in person? Jared looked away. Thursday. The three of us had dinner with Lance. Holland walked slowly around the studio, looking at the photographs. Most were landscapes, street scenes, portraits of strangers. But in the corner, partially hidden by books, was a picture of Linda. She was laughing with her head tilted back, sunlight playing in her hair. Did you often take pictures of your sister-in-law? Holland asked. Sometimes, Jared shrugged. She had a distinctive look, a good subject for portraits. And that didn't bother Lance? Jared tensed. Should it have? Just a question. Holland smiled softly. Mr. Tomlinson, we know that you and Linda were in touch. Perhaps more than the usual sister-in-law and brother-in-law relationship. Jared's face is petrified. I don't know what you're talking about. Malone pulled out his cell phone, showed the recovered correspondence with contact J. Are these your messages? Jared stared at the screen for a few seconds, then exhaled and slumped back in his chair. Yes. We have to talk to him. I can't go on like this. It'll be resolved tomorrow, Holland read out. What's this about, Mr. Tomlinson? Jared covered his face with his hands. We loved each other, he said deftly. It happened a few months ago. At first we were just talking. She was having problems with Lance, and I was always her shoulder to cry on. And then everything changed. And you were planning on telling Lance? Yeah, Linda wanted to leave him. She was afraid of how he'd react. Lance had always been controlling in their relationship, but we decided we had to be honest. When exactly did you plan this conversation? The day she... His voice shook. Tuesday. I was supposed to be there that evening, and we wanted to explain everything to Lance together. Malone and Holland looked at each other. Do you have proof of your relationship? Malone asked. Jared paused, then walked over to the bookcase and pulled out an album. There are pictures of us in here. And then there are the letters she wrote to me. She was afraid Lance would check her phone, so she'd pass notes sometimes. The album contained dozens of photos, Linda and Jared in the cafe, in the park, in his studio. Some showed them holding hands or hugging. The last picture was dated last week. Leaving Jared's studio with the scrapbook and letters as evidence, the detectives felt the case was taking a clearer shape. Classic love triangle, Holland said. And a motive for murder. Malone nodded. Linda Parker's funeral was held Thursday. The cemetery was filled with colleagues from the clinic, friends, neighbors. Lance stood by the casket, immaculately dressed in a black suit, his face expressing grief. Jared kept to the side, not approaching his brother. Malone and Holland watched from a distance, not interfering with the ceremony. After the funeral, they had organized an unspoken surveillance of Lance. Detective Rodriguez, who worked undercover, reported that evening. Parker returned home, stayed there for about an hour, then drove out of town to the lake. What was he doing there? Malone asked. He sat in the car for almost an hour, then he went to the shore, threw something in the water. Looks like a small box or a jewelry box. Were you able to reach it? No, it's too deep. We need divers. The next day, Holland met up with Amber West, a close friend of Linda's. They sat in a small cafe off the main streets. Linda was afraid of him, Amber said quietly, her palms around her cup. Not in the sense that he hit her. Lance never raised a hand to her, but he controlled her every move. How, exactly? Holland asked. He monitored her phone calls, asked her who she was seeing, even checked her work schedule, called the clinic. She felt like a golden cage. And she put up with it for a long time, Amber sighed. And then she met Jared. How long had they been together? About 4 months. At first they were just friends, Jared being the only person around them who saw Lance's true nature. And then it turned into something more. She was going to leave her husband? Yeah. She opened a separate account, got an apartment. We even smuggled some of her stuff in. She was planning to move in this week. Amber's voice trembled. Linda had hoped for a civilized divorce, but she was afraid Lance wouldn't let her go so easily. Did Lance know about her relationship with Jared? Amber shook her head. She was sure he didn't. They were very discreet. But… She fell silent. But… Holland nudged her. On Monday, the day before she died, Linda called me in a panic. Said she'd found printouts of her and Jared's correspondence in Lance's office. Somehow he'd hacked into her email or her phone. She was scared. Said Lance had been looking at her strangely all evening, like he was planning something. She didn't want to go to the police? She did, but she decided to talk to Jared first. They agreed to meet the next day and go to Lance's house together, explain everything. She said… Amber cried. She said, "If anything happens to me, you know who's to blame." After meeting with Amber, detectives obtained a search warrant for Lance's home computer. The tech found a tracking program installed on Linda's phone. "Classic spyware," the tech explained. "Gives access to messages, calls, can even turn on the microphone remotely. Installed 3 weeks ago." The search history on Lance's computer turned up queries like how to identify cheating wives, how to track a person's location, how to download deleted messages. And among the files was a folder of photos of Linda and Jared, taken secretly from a distance. Several showed them holding hands or hugging. Lance's last search query, made on Monday, the day before Linda's death, read, "How to put sleeping pills in water." "Do we have enough for an arrest?" Malone asked, reviewing the evidence collected. "Almost," Holland replied. "There's one more detail to check." They called Lance in for a second interrogation, but this time with a different strategy. Holland started the conversation by discussing the trivial: work schedule, mutual friends with Linda, plans for the future. Gradually, Lance relaxed. His answers became longer. And then she showed him a picture: Linda and Jared, laughing, holding hands. "When exactly did you find out about their connection, Mr. Parker?" Lance's face contorted with rage. It took an instant to get back to impassive, but it was enough. "I don't know what you mean." "You do," Holland said softly. "We found a tracking program on the computer, the pictures you took, the history of the search. You found out about their relationship and decided that if you couldn't have Linda, no one could have her." "That's absurd," Lance replied coldly. "On Monday, you were looking for information on how to put sleeping pills in water," Holland continued. "On Tuesday, Linda died of a sleeping pill overdose before falling down the stairs. Coincidence?" "I didn't kill my wife," Lance said firmly, but his fingers tapped nervously on the table. "Then explain why you lied about the time of death? Why did you claim you saw her alive at 4 a.m. when the medical examiner put the time of death between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m.? I could have been wrong. It was dark." "One more thing, Mr. Parker." Holland placed a photograph of a dark lake in front of him. "What did you throw into the water after the funeral?" Lance turned pale, his hands clenched into fists. "I want a lawyer," he said in a flat voice. Malone and Holland looked at each other. It was tantamount to a confession. The perfect husband with the perfect life was not what he seemed. Beneath the surface of the glossy facade lurked jealousy, obsession, and cold-blooded calculation. Early one morning in the conference room of the police station, Jude Malone arranged photos, documents, and charts on a large whiteboard. He was drinking his third cup of coffee. The detectives had spent the previous night working, analyzing every detail of the Linda Parker case. "Let's go over it again," Hannah Holland said, leaning back in her chair. "What do we know for sure?" Malone stood in front of the board. Linda Parker, 30 years old, pediatrician, found dead at the foot of the stairs in her own home. Initial theory was an accident caused by an overdose of sleeping pills, but the medical examiner determined the time of death to be between 23 and 1 a.m., which contradicts the husband's testimony. "Lance claimed he saw her alive at 4 a.m, Holland nodded. "That's the first major lie. She had characteristic bruises on her wrists, signs of a struggle, and too high a concentration of sleeping pills in her blood," Malone continued. "The neighbor heard an argument around midnight. Plus, we found out that Linda was romantically involved with Lance's brother, Jared, preparing to leave her husband, opening a secret account, planning to rent an apartment. And most importantly, the day before she died, Lance found out about the affair. Tracking programs and searches for sleeping pills were found on his computer." Malone emphasized the last point. "Everything points to him, but we need direct evidence," Holland finished. Something incontrovertible. What's on the list of items taken from the house? Malone flipped through the file. Jewelry, phone, computer, tablet, documents, closet items. Wait. Holland leaned closer. I remember in some of the crime scene photos, Linda was wearing a smart watch. Right. Malone quickly flipped through the photos. Here, an Apple smartwatch on her left wrist. Where are they now? Checking the list, they discovered the watch was among the physical evidence. An hour later, a technician provided access to the device's data. Most of the functions are standard, he explained. Fitness tracker, notifications, calendar. But look, he opened the voice recorder app. There are some audio recordings in here. The detectives looked at each other. The first recording was dated 2 weeks earlier. Turn it on, Malone nodded. Linda's voice came from the speaker, muffled, as if she were speaking while covering her watch with her hand. I'm recording this in case something happens to me. Lance is becoming more and more controlling. Today he checked my phone again while I was in the shower. When I asked why, he said he was worried about me. But it's not worry. It's obsession. A second recording, made a week later, contained a snippet of the conversation. Where were you after work? Lance's voice sounded deceptively calm. I told you, I stopped by Amber's. Why do you have to interrogate me every time? Because I care about you, Linda. This town isn't safe. Lance, I'm 30 years old. I'm a doctor. I can take care of myself. You're my wife. You belong to me. The last entry was made the night Linda died at 23:30. You think I don't know? Lance's voice sounded cold, with barely contained rage. You think I'm blind? Lance, let's talk calmly. I was going to tell you everything. You and my brother. My own brother. How long has this been going on? It's not what you think. I've seen the pictures. I've seen the messages. Did you laugh at me behind my back? No one was laughing. I just can't do this anymore. You control my every move. It's like I'm in a cage. The sound of breaking glass was heard. Lance, calm down. What are you doing? Drink this. You need to calm down. I won't. Drink it! The recording was interrupted by the noise of a struggle. Then there was silence. Silence hung in the room. Finally, Holland exhaled. She was recording their fight on purpose, creating evidence. And recorded her own murder, Malone added grimly. Call the DA. We've got everything we need. Jared Tomlinson was sitting in his studio sorting through photos when the detectives arrived. On the table were dozens of pictures of Linda, smiling, pensive, laughing. I'm putting them together for an exhibit, he said, not looking at those who entered. In Linda's memory, I think she'd like it. Mr. Tomlinson, Malone began, we have some new information about your sister-in-law's death. Jared looked up. Did you arrest Lance? He sounded hopeful and afraid at the same time. Not yet, Holland replied, but we have an audio tape of them arguing the night of the murder. Linda recorded their conflicts on her smart watch. Jared sighed convulsively. I told her to do that, after she told me Lance was getting dangerous. I was afraid for her. He clenched his fists. She should have left sooner. Why didn't she? Malone asked, afraid of his reaction. Lance had always been obsessive. Back in college, if he liked a girl, he wouldn't rest until he got her. It's the same with Linda. He pursued her for 2 years, literally stalked her. When did your affair begin? Holland asked. Jared rubbed the bridge of his nose. 4 months ago. At first we just talked. Linda was unhappy, looking for support. I was the only one who knew the real Lance, and then everything changed. Were you planning on telling him? Yeah, Tuesday. That was the day she died. Jared's voice shook. We agreed to meet at their house that night and explain everything. I waited for her call, but it didn't come. And then the next morning, why didn't you tell us about this right away? I was afraid. I thought you'd think I killed her to avoid sharing her with Lance, or that she and I planned to kill him for money, and then I got rid of her. Is that true? Malone asked bluntly. No, Jared exclaimed. I loved her, really loved her. We were going to start a new life. A modest one, but ours. Holland pointed to the photographs. Some of them were taken in secret. Lance might have seen them and suspected something. Maybe, Jared nodded. I asked her to pose when we were together. It was dangerous, but she was so beautiful. Jared's eyes filled with tears. I had to protect her. The interrogation room was flooded with the cold light of fluorescent bulbs. Lance Parker sat across from the detectives, an attorney in an expensive suit next to him. Hannah Holland was slowly spreading out photos and documents on the table. "Mr. Parker," she began calmly, "we have reconstructed all the events of the night of your wife's death." "My client will not answer any questions," the lawyer interjected. "It's not a question," Holland smiled. "I'm just updating Mr. Parker on the progress of the investigation." She posted a picture of Linda's smart watch. "You know, modern gadgets are an amazing thing. They can record our conversations, track our location." She looked at Lance meaningfully. "Preserve evidence." Lance's face twitched. "What are you talking about?" "Your wife recorded your arguments, Mr. Parker, on her watch." Holland turned on the audio. As the voices came from the speaker, Lance's face paled, his fingers clenched into fists. When the recording ended, the lawyer leaned toward him, whispering something, but Lance waved it away. "This only proves that we had a fight. Not that I killed her." "What about the fact that you made her drink water with sleeping pills in it?" Malone asked. "Water that had twice the therapeutic dose in it? The water you'd looked up on the internet the day before?" "It's just a concern," Lance replied coldly. "She was overexcited. I wanted her to calm down." "You know what's interesting?" Holland continued. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Your parents were, an interesting couple. Your father controlled your mother's every move, checked her cell phone, forbade her to see her friends." Lance moved forward a little bit. "Where did you—" "We talked to your relatives, family friends. You grew up thinking this kind of relationship was the norm. Control equals love. That's what you must have thought, right?" Holland leaned in closer. "And when Linda decided to leave, you couldn't accept it. The perfect wife leaving the perfect husband? Unthinkable." "It's psychological manipulation," the lawyer interjected. "My client is not obliged to—" "She belonged to me," Lance said quietly. There was silence in the room. "I beg your pardon?" Malone interjected. "I said she belonged to me," Lance repeated louder. "I made her what she became. Without me, she was just one of many ambitious girls. I gave her position, connections, a home, and she repaid me with betrayal, with my brother." He spat out the last words. Holland looked at him silently, letting him continue. "You know what's ironic? I was always defending that loser. Jared was always in the shadows, always second, and the only way he could top me was by stealing my wife." "Lance, I strongly suggest you keep your mouth shut," the lawyer tried to interrupt him. "She shouldn't have left," Lance continued, as if he hadn't heard. "It would have been wrong, unnatural." "Is that why you decided to kill her?" Holland asked softly. "I didn't plan to," Lance answered, his gaze becoming absent. "I wanted to talk, explain to her why she was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. She said she was suffocating around me, that she loved him, my brother." Malone and Holland looked at each other. The confession was happening right before their eyes. "What happened next?" Malone asked quietly. "I dissolved the sleeping pills in water beforehand, just in case. She'd been so emotional lately. She hadn't been sleeping well. I thought it would help her calm down, and then we could talk rationally in the morning." Lance spoke smoothly, as if he were describing a business strategy. "She didn't want to drink." "Make her," Holland clarified. "To help her make the right decision," Lance corrected. "She drank and almost immediately felt faint. She said she was going up to the bedroom. I followed her. I wanted to make sure she was okay. On the stairs, she started talking again about the divorce, about how happy she and Jared would be." Lance fell silent, his gaze blank. Malone nudged him. "I just put my hand on her shoulder. I wanted to hold her up. She was wobbling, and she jerked violently at my touch like I was something disgusting. After all I'd done for her," his voice rose. "She stumbled, or I pushed her. I don't remember exactly. She fell so slowly, like she was in slow motion." "Did you try to catch her?" Holland asked. Lance looked her straight in the eye. "No, I just watched." "And then?" "Then I went over, checked for a pulse. There was none. The neck looked, wrong." Lance swallowed. "I realized I had to create an alibi, so I made it look like she fell later. moved her things as if she'd slept in the bedroom and came down at night, then drove to a meeting that was scheduled for the morning. You didn't call an ambulance? Didn't try to help? She couldn't be helped anymore. Lance shrugged. Besides, if she'd betrayed me with Jared, who knows who she'd be attracted to next? Linda deserved better than to be a directionless, searching woman. There was silence in the room. Lance's lawyer covered his face with his hands. Lance Parker, you are under arrest for the murder of Linda Parker, Malone said formally. You have the right to remain silent. An hour later, Lance was taken to the detention center. Holland and Malone collected documents in the conference room. Classic case of controlling violence, Holland said. He couldn't bear the thought of her leaving, and would be with his brother, Malone added. A double betrayal. Malone rubbed his tired eyes. 3 days of almost no sleep had taken its toll. He pinned the last picture to the board, a shot of a happy Linda from her medical school graduation. Young, radiant, with a limitless future ahead of her. You know what the scariest part is? He asked, without turning to his coworker. To everyone around them, they were the perfect couple. No one could see what was going on behind closed doors. Holland nodded, gathering up the evidence folders. That's the way it always is, Jude. People only see what they're shown. Captain Ramirez peered into the room, looking pleased. Good work, detectives. DA is thrilled with the evidence we've collected. He says it's ironclad. The jury won't even have to deliberate. Too late for Linda, Malone said quietly. Ramirez put a hand on his shoulder. But not too late for justice. You both deserve a rest. Don't come tomorrow, get some sleep. When the captain had gone, Holland went to the window. The rain that had started in the afternoon had intensified toward evening, drumming on the glass. Jared asked about Linda's things. He wanted to organize an exhibit of her photos and donate the proceeds to Charity A Fund to help victims of domestic violence. That's a good idea, Malone agreed. Something tells me Lance wouldn't mind that much right now. They walked out into the parking lot in the pouring rain. Holland opened her umbrella, offering shelter to both of them. Need a ride? I wouldn't say no. They were silent in the car, listening to the sound of the rain and a soft jazz tune from the radio. Finally, Holland broke the silence. Do you think she knew he could do something like this? Malone hesitated. I guess she must have. Otherwise, why record their conversations? She was afraid of him. She just couldn't admit it even to herself. She'd hoped until the last moment to resolve things peacefully. Those tapes, Holland shook her head. The first one was dated almost a month ago. It was as if she'd been preparing, gathering evidence. For the trial, Malone nodded. She was a smart woman. She knew Lance wouldn't let her go. She'd decided to stand up to him anyway. Brave, Malone said quietly, and alone in her struggle. Holland stopped the car outside his house. It was hard to believe it had all started with love. Lance probably hadn't always been like this. Maybe he wasn't, Malone shrugged. Or maybe he was just better at hiding it. Obsession often masqueraded as caring. He opened the car door, but Holland stopped him by touching his arm. You know, it all makes you wonder, what if she'd gotten help sooner? Came to the police with those tapes, reported her husband's controlling behavior. Maybe that would have saved her life. Malone nodded. Or maybe we would have said there was nothing we could do as long as he didn't physically touch her. He walked out into the rain, waving goodbye to his colleague. Tomorrow would be a new day and new cases. They won't help Linda Parker anymore, but maybe they'll save someone else who now lives in a golden cage with the perfect partner. And in his cell, Lance Parker lay sleepless, staring at the ceiling. Linda's last words to him before his fall rang in his head. I loved you, Lance. Really loved you. But you turned that love into a cage. He closed his eyes, but the words didn't fade, haunting him in the darkness. The perfect husband had created the perfect prison first for his wife, and now for himself.